So last week, Jussie Smollett was indicted again regarding his being the victim of a racist and homophobic, politically motivated assault. Now, he is being indicted for filing false police reports on those claims. And this coming up again, and finally the potential for justice to be served, makes me feel like this is a good opportunity to kind of readdress this story, because I think people forget the magnitude of it, and there are still comments out to this day that are easy to find from very high profile people regarding this attack. And if it turns out that if Jussie Smollett is found guilty, and in being found guilty we basically agree that the allegations against him are true, that these people's comments still being available and out is kind of very damning on their part. So I just kind of want to go over a brief timeline and then go through some people whose comments on the topic at this point are irresponsible, and if Jussie Smollett is found guilty, are incredibly irresponsible. So I want to start with a brief timeline. I'm not going to go over every particular detail, but I do think that there are some points that are worth re-emphasizing. So the first point that I want to emphasize is that this didn't start with the attack. It actually started with a threatening letter he had received, and then a week later was the attack. And then the important notes that I want to emphasize about the attack was that he alleged that two white men attacked him in ski masks, saying racist and homophobic slurs at him, and screamed, "This is MAGA country." So this was the attack that Jussie Smollett alleges happened to him. The next, I think, important point to make was that there were actually arrests made. Two men were arrested in connection with the case who turned out to be Nigerian brothers that were actually extras on the show that Smollett worked on. So given Smollett's alleged claims that he was assaulted by white people screaming abuse at him, saying this is MAGA country, the fact that the two people that they found in the area to be Nigerians with associations with Smollett turned out to be quite suspicious, and so upon further investigation, the Cook County Grand Jury indicted Jussie on 16 felony accounts, which was up from 1, but the accounts were for filing a false police report. So there's an allegation now that the story that Jussie Smollett told about being assaulted by racist homophobes, Trump supporters, is being questioned. And now fast forward to last week when Jussie Smollett was indicted again on the charges of fabricating a hate crime. So I want to demonstrate the magnitude of this story. Jussie Smollett alleged that white, racist, homophobe Trump supporters assaulted him, and now he's alleged that what he said was completely made up. And that's a big deal, and I want to go through some notable examples of why I think that's a big deal, and I want to start with the smallest and grow to the biggest. So to start with the smallest, I'm going to start with celebrities, because celebrities aren't engaged with everyday things. Celebrities have their own interpersonal lives and interactions. Jussie Smollett was a celebrity, so I can imagine that he has friends in the industry who would like to defend him. And of course, there is the notable fact that Jussie Smollett is gay and black, so the fact that he was the alleged victim of a racist, homophobic attack is just ever emphasized. So just starting off, we have here Queen Latifah stands by Jussie Smollett, and this is dated about a year ago from today. Again, I just want to demonstrate the magnitude of this. Queen Latifah isn't a nobody. Queen Latifah isn't some random person on the street. She is a famous celebrity, singer, rapper, songwriter who propped this up. Next, an example that I personally am less familiar with, but Ava DuVernay. She's been responsible and involved in many things. Selma, A Wrinkle in Time, 13th, Queen Sugar, When They See Us. She is a filmmaker and film distributor. Won directing awards, not a nobody. We love you, Jussie Smollett. We will protect you and support you and ride for you. You know who we are. This was for, even the first indictment, but I still just want to say that this is readily available on the internet, that I can just look up this person's name in connection with this other person and find it. And then you have all these people propping it up. This one is my personal favorite of all the celebrities that I found in association with this. This is Yvette Nicole Brown. Amazing in Drake and Josh, amazing in Community, but again, she says, and people said Jussie Smollett lied about the attack. Those who know him know he would never do that. I hope they catch the racists soon. This is then about... what is that, 2 weeks, 18 days later, she said, since the trolls have started, let me say clearly that I still believe my friend Jussie Smollett. News reports have been all over the place, but I will continue to believe him because I know him to be a man of integrity. That is where I stand. We all good? We should be good. And then even later, after he has now been indicted, she says, I don't know the name of Jussie Smollett's attorney speaking right now, but she looks like a Beverly or a Gloria. That is a compliment. Every sister named Beverly or Gloria is the truth. Hashtag Yas Sis. And then again, Yvette Nicole Brown, not a nobody. Drake and Josh fame from Community, amazing actress, funny, but has a very terrible take on this topic. But I think that I started this fairly enough saying, these are celebrities. Jussie Smollett himself was a celebrity. I'm sure that they had interpersonal relationships. Celebrities are also, not arbiters of truth. These people are famous people who happen to be good at what they do, and, they have their opinions. Fine, well and good. I am willing to respect that. But that's why next I want to move on to news personalities. So we've seen some celebrities with bad takes, but let's check out news correspondents. The first person I want to start with is Joy Reid, who says, nooses never really disappeared as messages of a very specific kind of terror, but every time they're used, my God, it's chilling. Praying for Jussie's full recovery and for us all. So Joy Reid here is associating the alleged assault on Jussie Smollett with lynchings throughout American history. And again, Joy Reid is a national correspondent at MSNBC, and this is her take on this. I will say that this was before he was indicted for potentially falsifying the claims, but this is, again, attached to this person's name, still out there, still defending this person. So, continuing with MSNBC personalities, we have Chris Hayes responding to Brian York. Brian York said, huge story developing in Chicago after prosecutors drop charges against Smollett and judge seals record, hiding all evidence against Smollett from public view. City officials go public with their outrage. Says Smollett is guilty, overwhelming evidence against him, a whitewash. So this was shortly after the original indictments against Smollett were dropped. Chris Hayes says, so you're saying declining to press charges doesn't mean that the person in guilty, that their person in question didn't commit the act. Interesting. And I think Aaron Lockhart right here, this dude, has the best take and says, I think the difference there would be the part about overwhelming evidence you seem to have glossed over. True enough. You next have Chris Hayes saying, independent of the question of what a just resolution of the Smollett situation would be, what Rahm is doing right now is just really gross. Did the mayor ever display this level of umbrage and outrage when his own police department shot and killed a kid in cold blood and then helped them cover it up? As to the cost of the Smollett investigation, I think the city seeks civil restitution is perfectly appropriate, but keep in mind the city spent about $50 million a year to settle lawsuits against cops for misconduct. So, not a bad point. Cops are getting off scot-free for killing people, but also at the same time, kind of a weird pivot and defense for this person being able to fake a hate crime. Again, this is an MSNBC Weekly podcast host and television newsday opinion host. Like, this is not a nobody. But like I said, I wanted to start with the smallest examples and move on to the largest. I think people have a fair amount of distrust towards the media, and I think that people can agree that celebrities have their own bias and their own personal inner workings that might cloud their judgment on why they would say these things. But the next examples, I think, are really important to kind of emphasize where we are headed as a society, that people really need to understand and appreciate the magnitude of. You know, not to be too deep, but with Twitter and things of that nature, the ability to respond to things is incredibly heightened, and it is important that our leaders, to spoil the next group of people, that our leaders are responsible with that platform. So the next group that I want to highlight are those who were running for the 2020 presidency. And the reason I want to highlight these is because these are people who are running for the highest office in the land. They were running to be the President of the United States, the leader of the free world. These are the candidates, one of the two major political parties that they are putting forward. Again, I want to kind of emphasize the situation by starting with the least bad and moving on to the worst one. First, I want to say Kamala Harris, so far of all the people that I looked up, has at least in some way retracted what she said. On the screen it says, like most of you, I have seen the reports about Jussie Smollett. I'm sad, frustrated, and disappointed. Basically, that's the idea that she says, when people make a false police report, it is bad, it diverts resources, it makes it difficult, and it hurts actual victims, which, I want to start by commending. And again, this is the least bad example because this person, Kamala Harris, who in many ways I disagree with, at least retracted. But I still think Kamala Harris's comments after the alleged incident occurred, I think, are worth highlighting. Kamala Harris says, Jussie Smollett is one of the kindest, most gentle beings I know. I'm praying for his quick recovery. This was an attempted modern-day lynching. No one should have to fear for their life because of their sexuality or color of their skin. We must confront hate. And the part that I want to highlight there is the mention of lynching because, again, this didn't even occur, and the terms that these politicians are using are just incredibly strident. And again, if it actually turned out to be true and this had actually occurred, would have been understandable to say, but given that nothing was known at the time, it is somewhat irresponsible to just be throwing around these terms. But again, at least Kamala Harris retracted. So continuing with the trend of the smallest examples to the largest examples, Kamala Harris dropped out of the race. But here's Eric Swalwell's comment, another person running for the President of the United States, the presidency. Eric Swalwell says, what happened to Jussie Smollett is vile, tragic. Thankfully, he will recover. But hate crimes like this are happening more frequently, egged on by careless, hate-filled rhetoric. We start reducing these crimes by rejecting the speech. Neither can ever be accepted as normal. And if you're watching, there's a lady who replied, and it's a little KKK hood MAGA hat. And it's again, this attack didn't happen. But you have somebody who wants to be the President of the United States saying that that it's happening more frequently and that it's being egged on by careless rhetoric. You cannot make this up. Julian Castro, another person who was trying to be the Democratic nominee for the President of the United States, tweeted, if the reports of Jussie Smollett's attack last night are true, and this was a racially and homophobically motivated attack, then God willing, justice will be swift and thorough. That this happens today in America is not surprising, but it is no less heartbreaking. This shakes us to our core. I'm just going to start by giving him credit. At least he said, if the reports are true. I appreciate the level of skepticism, but then in the reply second tweet to just say that this happens in today's America is not surprising. Irresponsible and completely overshadows any idea that your tweet implies that this is an allegation. You have basically decided that this is true. Julian Castro, that is. The next failed presidential candidate is Kirsten Gillibrand. This is a sickening and outrageous attack, and horribly. It's the latest of too many hate crimes against LGBTQ people and people of color. We are all responsible for condemning this behavior and every person who enables or normalizes it. Again, this is the strong condemnation of an attack that in the coming months might turn out to be completely fabricated. And last but not least of the former presidential hopefuls is Cory Booker, who said the vicious attack on actor Jussie Smollett was an attempted modern-day lynching. There's that word again. This for an attack that may well have been fabricated. Again, it is still alleged as of today. But these are not nobodies. I want that to be emphasized, that this was something that did not happen, and that these are all people who have commented on it, who, again, for emphasis, and I know it is just repetitive, but wanted to be the President of the United States. And now we are going to move on to those who are actually still in the race. Now, I am going to go by 538 polls of popularity for this order. Again, starting with the least significant case of people who, by the way, still want to be President of the United States and who are still actively running, and going to the largest. Here is Tulsi Gabbard's comment. This is so heartbreaking. At Jussie Smollett, you are not alone. We are with you. We must stand up and condemn this hate, bigotry, and violence. Now, I will admit, I like Tulsi Gabbard a lot. She is like the Yvette Nicole Brown of all the potential presidential candidates. She's the one that I am the most familiar with and the one that I like the most. But again, it's still a bad take, and given that this is about to, potentially come out to basically have been fabricated, you should say something or retract it or comment on it. Now, to give credit where credit is due, Amy Klobuchar said that the prosecutors originally dropping the charges against Jussie Smollett makes no sense. So I don't want you to think that I'm just here to rag on people. Although I think so far the situation itself makes them rag on themselves. It's not me ragging on them. Me pointing out things that have happened and things that they have said is them ragging on themselves. But good on Amy Klobuchar for at least having said something along the lines of what Jussie Smollett did might have actually been bad. So now we arrive at the candidates who, according to 538 polls as of today, are polling above 10%. These people, just to lay it all out again, but I don't think can be emphasized enough, want to be the President of the United States and are on track to become, or at least have the potential to become, the President of the United States. And the first person on that list is Pete Buttigieg, who says, while the struggle for basic hate crime legislation continues here in Indiana, this horrible attack calls all Americans to stand against hatred and violence in all its forms. There's also Michael Bloomberg, who's made no comment, which is, I guess, not a negative. While I don't think Joe Biden is long for the debate and might have been able to have been relegated to the category of those who dropped out already, I think it's important to note that Joe Biden, according to 538 as of today, is in second place. And Joe Biden's comment on this was, what happened today to Jussie Smollett must never be tolerated in this country. We must stand up and demand that we no longer give this hate safe harbor. That homophobia and racism have no place on our streets or in our hearts. We are with you, Jussie. We are with you, Jussie, for something that might not have happened. Also, please vote for me. And last, but certainly not least, in fact first, we have Bernie Sanders, who says, the racist and homophobic attack on Jussie Smollett is a horrific instance of the surging hostility towards minorities in the country. We must come together and eradicate all forms of bigotry and violence. Surging hostilities towards minorities, he says, when discussing a case that may soon turn out to be proven completely, fully false. Jussie Smollett was, by all accounts, a low-tier celebrity. If you look at his Wikipedia page now, his career entry is shorter than the personal scandals he's been involved in. He claimed to be the victim of a racist and homophobic attack by two Trump supporters, which, as of today, is looking more and more likely to be proven false. Celebrities defended him, certain news personalities defended or at least obfuscated the severity of the claims, but as already mentioned, the worst of the worst are those who want to hold the highest office of the land. The people who, if they had their way, would be sitting in the Oval Office conducting business on behalf of the most powerful nation to ever exist. Holistically, I personally think that all of these comments, in their own way, are equally bad. And I think this because of this hypothetical. Two notable examples are Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, who both used the term lynching in their description. Meanwhile, you have somebody like Bernie Sanders, who just said that it's a horrific instance of surging hostility towards minorities around the country. If prompted, do you think that Bernie Sanders would disagree with it being a lynching? No. If he was prompted at the time, he would have said, absolutely, I would consider this a lynching. And what I find even more disturbing about it is the fact that certain escalatory language is used. For example, with Bernie Sanders, he said, the attack is a horrific instance of the surging hostility towards minorities around the country. Eric Swalwell says, hate crimes like this are happening more frequently. So, if we were to ask them today, if we were to bring these people forward today, I'm sure that Bernie Sanders today would probably be able to point out what was wrong about what Jussie Smollett did. But if you then said, do you think that hostilities towards minorities are surging around the country? He would say, yes. And while I picked the examples that I did because they were people who were running for the presidency, it is worth noting that after these people eventually lose, and only one person can be the nominee, so they can't all win, so after these people inevitably lose, they continue to exist in their seats of power. They are still members of Congress. They are still senators. They are still influential. These are people who are going to continue to walk the halls of power in the near future. And they have bad takes, and they are irresponsible. And I think it's worth noting.